They thought I'd stay silent. They thought I'd endure. But when the CEO's wife slashed my bonus to reinvest in corporate image, she didn't know she'd just pulled the pin on the grenade beneath her $42 million empire. One signature, one line of code, one locked contract, and their entire supply chain would flatline overnight. This isn't a story about anger. It's a lesson in the power of the underestimated and how I brought an entire company to its knees without lifting a finger. My name is Maya Caldwell, and for 3 years, I was the invisible architect behind Halberd Dynamics' $42 million supply chain infrastructure, senior systems engineer. Officially, the woman who kept their logistics breathing, unofficially. Every shipment that moved through our ports, every container that crossed international waters, every delivery that arrived on time, it all ran through the system I built from scratch. The conference room on the 32nd floor had never felt colder than it did that December morning at 9:30 a.m. I sat across from Veronica Slate, our CFO and the CEO's wife, watching her manicured fingers drum against the mahogany table. To her right sat Damian Slate, our CEO, scrolling through his phone with the detached interest of someone who'd already made up his mind about whatever was coming. "Maya," Veronica began, her voice carrying that practiced corporate sweetness that always preceded a knife to the ribs. "We need to discuss your compensation adjustment." Adjustment, not bonus, not reward, adjustment. I'd worked 14-hour days for 12 months straight. I'd saved the company $8 million by optimizing our routing algorithms. I'd personally prevented a catastrophic system failure during Black Friday that would have cost us every major client on the East Coast. My performance review had been flawless. Damien himself had called my work exceptional just 2 weeks ago. "Your bonus this year," Veronica continued, sliding a paper across the table, "will be $2,500. The number sat there between us like a slap. 2,500, down from the 45,000 I'd been promised, down from what I'd earned. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my pulse hammered in my ears. "My contract specifically outlines, contracts can be revised based on company needs," Veronica interrupted. "We're reallocating resources toward our new brand initiative. I'm sure you understand that corporate image is crucial for our growth trajectory." Corporate image. Translation: Veronica's vanity project, a glossy marketing campaign featuring her as the face of ethical leadership in logistics. I'd seen the invoices, $2 million for a Times Square billboard, another $1 million for a documentary no one would watch. Damien finally looked up from his phone. "It's nothing personal. Maya, everyone's making sacrifices." I wanted to ask if everyone included Veronica's quarterly shopping trips to Milan or Damien's new Bentley in the executive garage. Instead, I watched Trevor Slate, Damien's younger brother, stroll past the glass walls of the conference room, fresh out of his MBA program, zero experience in logistics, suddenly very interested in system architecture, according to the org chart rumors. "Is Trevor taking over my department?" I asked directly. The silence that followed told me everything. Veronica's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "We're exploring a restructuring that better aligns with our strategic vision." Strategic vision, another euphemism. They wanted me out, but they needed my system running until Trevor could pretend he knew what he was doing, cut my bonus to nothing, humiliate me in front of the board, make me quit so they wouldn't have to pay severance. "The decision is final," Veronica added. Standing up, her heels clicked against the floor like a countdown. "If you find the new compensation structure incompatible with your career goals, perhaps Halberd isn't the right fit anymore." Damien was already walking toward the door, the meeting apparently over in his mind. But Veronica lingered, leaning close enough that I could smell her $500 perfume. "You're brilliant, Maya. But brilliance without connections is just potential energy. Trevor has connections. You have algorithms." She left me sitting there with the bonus adjustment form, my name already typed in, waiting for my signature, $2,500, after everything I'd built, after everything I'd saved them. I signed it, not because I accepted it, but because Veronica had just made a critical error. She thought I was just another engineer, another replaceable cog in her husband's machine. She didn't know about Clause 7.4c in my original contract. She didn't know that every line of code in our Atlas sync system was my intellectual property. She didn't know that I wasn't just the architect of their supply chain, I was the only one holding the keys. I walked back to my office, past the cubicles full of colleagues who avoided my eyes, past the wall of awards with my name etched in brass, past 3 years of 60-hour weeks and weekend emergencies. Veronica thought she'd won, but she'd just triggered something she couldn't possibly understand. She'd declared war on someone who knew every vulnerability in their system, every weakness in their armor. They'd cut my bonus to break me. Instead, they'd just lit the fuse. My name is Maya Caldwell, and for 3 years, I was the invisible architect behind Halberd Dynamics' $42 million supply chain infrastructure. Senior systems engineer, officially, the woman who kept their logistics breathing, unofficially. Every shipment that moved through our ports, every container that crossed international waters, every delivery that arrived on time, it all ran through the system I built from scratch. The conference room on the 32nd floor had never felt colder than it did that December morning at 9:30 a.m. I sat across from Veronica Slate, our CFO and the CEO's wife, watching her manicured fingers drum against the mahogany table. To her right sat Damian Slate, our CEO, scrolling through his phone with the detached interest of someone who'd already made up his mind about whatever was coming. "Maya," Veronica began, her voice carrying that practiced corporate sweetness that always preceded a knife to the ribs. "We need to discuss your compensation adjustment." Adjustment, not bonus, not reward, adjustment. I'd worked 14-hour days for 12 months straight. I'd saved the company $8 million by optimizing our routing algorithms. I'd personally prevented a catastrophic system failure during Black Friday that would have cost us every major client on the East Coast. My performance review had been flawless. Damian himself had called my work exceptional just 2 weeks ago. "Your bonus this year," Veronica continued, sliding a paper across the table, "will be $2,500. The number sat there between us like a slap. 2,500, down from the 45,000 I'd been promised, down from what I'd earned. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my pulse hammered in my ears. "My contract specifically outlines, contracts can be revised based on company needs," Veronica interrupted. "We're reallocating resources toward our new brand initiative. I'm sure you understand that corporate image is crucial for our growth trajectory." Corporate image. Translation: Veronica's vanity project. A glossy marketing campaign featuring her as the face of ethical leadership in logistics. I'd seen the invoices, $2 million for a Times Square billboard, another $1 million for a documentary no one would watch. Damian finally looked up from his phone. "It's nothing personal. Maya, everyone's making sacrifices." I wanted to ask if everyone included Veronica's quarterly shopping trips to Milan or Damian's new Bentley in the executive garage. Instead, I watched Trevor Slate, Damian's younger brother, stroll past the glass walls of the conference room, fresh out of his MBA program, zero experience in logistics, suddenly very interested in system architecture, according to the org chart rumors. "Is Trevor taking over my department?" I asked directly. The silence that followed told me everything. Veronica's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "We're exploring a restructuring that better aligns with our strategic vision." Strategic vision, another euphemism. They wanted me out, but they needed my system running until Trevor could pretend he knew what he was doing, cut my bonus to nothing, humiliate me in front of the board, make me quit so they wouldn't have to pay severance. "The decision is final," Veronica added. Standing up, her heels clicked against the floor like a countdown. "If you find the new compensation structure incompatible with your career goals, perhaps Halberd isn't the right fit anymore." Damian was already walking toward the door. The meeting apparently over in his mind, but Veronica lingered, leaning close enough that I could smell her $500 perfume. You're brilliant, Maya. But brilliance without connections is just potential energy. Trevor has connections. You have algorithms. She left me sitting there with the bonus adjustment form, my name already typed in, waiting for my signature. $2,500. After everything I'd built, after everything I'd saved them. I signed it, not because I accepted it, but because Veronica had just made a critical error. She thought I was just another engineer, another replaceable cog in her husband's machine. She didn't know about Clause 7.4c in my original contract. She didn't know that every line of code in our Atlas Sync system was my intellectual property. She didn't know that I wasn't just the architect of their supply chain, I was the only one holding the keys. I walked back to my office, past the cubicles full of colleagues who avoided my eyes, past the wall of awards with my name etched in brass, past 3 years of 60-hour weeks and weekend emergencies. Veronica thought she'd won, but she'd just triggered something she couldn't possibly understand. She'd declared war on someone who knew every vulnerability in their system, every weakness in their armor. They'd cut my bonus to break me. Instead, they'd just lit the fuse. The announcement came 3 weeks later during the quarterly all-hands meeting. Veronica stood at the podium, her smile sharp enough to cut glass, as she unveiled the future of Halberd Logistics, a $42 million partnership with Skyvera Logistics. This revolutionary collaboration, she said, clicking through slides filled with meaningless corporate buzzwords, will position Halberd at the forefront of supply chain innovation. I sat in the back row, watching my colleagues nod along like sheep. Nobody questioned why we were outsourcing critical infrastructure to a company that hadn't existed 18 months ago. Nobody asked why Skyvera's CEO, Marcus Rothwell, shared Veronica's maiden name. Nobody wondered why we were replacing a system that had operated at 99.9% efficiency with an untested alternative. But I knew. I'd done my research the moment Skyvera's name first appeared in our internal communications. Marcus Rothwell was Veronica's first cousin, a failed real estate developer who'd pivoted to logistics after his third bankruptcy. Skyvera's entire technical team consisted of 12 junior developers poached from a coding boot camp. Their previous biggest contract had been managing inventory for a chain of pet stores in Wisconsin. And now they were taking over my system. The technical handover meeting happened that afternoon. Veronica had scheduled it for 2 p.m. sharp, ensuring maximum visibility with the entire leadership team present. She wanted an audience for my humiliation. Maya will be transitioning her responsibilities to ensure seamless integration with Skyvera's platform, she announced, gesturing to Marcus and his team of 20-somethings in ill-fitting suits. We expect full cooperation during this critical phase. Marcus stepped forward, all artificial confidence and borrowed authority. We've reviewed the existing infrastructure. Frankly, it's overcomplicated. Our streamlined approach will cut operational redundancy by 40%. Operational redundancy. He meant the fail-safes I'd built to prevent exactly the kind of catastrophic failure that had destroyed our competitor. Meridian Shipping. Last year, but I smiled and nodded, playing the part of the defeated engineer. I'll need complete access to the source code, Marcus continued, including all authentication protocols and API keys. Of course, I replied, pulling up my laptop. Though you should be aware that certain components of Atlas Sync require specific authorization protocols. Veronica's eyes narrowed. All company property will be transferred immediately, no exceptions. Absolutely, I agreed. I'll provide everything Halberd owns. The key word being owns. Veronica had never read my original contract carefully. Neither had legal. Apparently, the Atlas Sync routing algorithm, the core engine that made everything work, was licensed to Halberd, not owned by them, a crucial distinction that would soon matter very much. I spent the next 2 hours walking Marcus through the system architecture. He nodded along, pretending to understand concepts that were clearly beyond him. His team frantically took notes they'd never be able to decipher. When I explained the multi-threaded synchronization process that prevented shipping conflicts across 17 time zones, Marcus actually yawned. We'll simplify all of this, he said dismissively. Your over-engineering is exactly why Halberd needs fresh perspective. Trevor Slate chose that moment to enter the room, standing beside his sister-in-law like a prince surveying his new kingdom. He'd been shadowing me for exactly 3 days, during which he'd asked questions like, "Why can't we just use Excel for this? And couldn't we just hire more people instead of relying on automation?" "Trevor will be overseeing the transition from Halberd's side," Veronica announced. "His innovative vision aligns perfectly with Skyvera's approach." Innovative vision. The man who thought the cloud was literally in the sky was going to oversee a $42 million infrastructure overhaul. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling up the compliance dashboard. "The system shows several pending authorization flags. These will need to be resolved before any transition." Veronica waved her hand dismissively. "Technical details can be handled post-transition. We go live with Skyvera in 2 weeks." 2 weeks. I couldn't hide my genuine surprise. The stress testing alone should take 2 weeks, Veronica repeated, her tone making it clear the discussion was over. "If you can't facilitate that timeline, we'll find someone who can." The threat hung in the air like a guillotine. Around the table, the leadership team avoided eye contact, each of them calculating their own survival odds in Veronica's new regime. "Understood," I said quietly. 2 weeks it is." As the meeting ended, Veronica pulled me aside. "I know what you're thinking. Maya, you're thinking we need you, that this system can't run without you. But you're wrong. You're just code, and code can be rewritten." She walked away, her heels echoing down the hallway, leaving me standing among the boxes of my dismantled career. She thought she'd delivered the killing blow. She thought she'd won. But Veronica had just made the biggest mistake of her professional life. She'd confused ownership with control. She'd mistaken silence for surrender. In 2 weeks, she'd learned the difference. The resignation letter was already written, saved in my drafts folder for 3 days before I printed it. Times New Roman, 12-point font, professionally neutral, no anger, no accusations, just 2 weeks' notice effective immediately. I placed it in a manila envelope along with my keycard, parking pass, and the corporate credit card I'd never once used for anything personal. But first, there was work to do. I arrived at the office at 5:30 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else. The building was silent except for the hum of servers in the basement, my servers, running my code, keeping $42 million worth of cargo moving across the globe. I had 2 weeks to ensure everything was properly documented, 2 weeks to fulfill my professional obligations, 2 weeks to set the stage. I started with the documentation. Every function, every method, every single line of code that Halberd actually owned was meticulously annotated. I created flowcharts, diagrams, step-by-step guides that a child could follow. Everything was organized into a pristine white binder, 4 inches thick, tabbed and cross-referenced. It was beautiful in its completeness. Except for one small omission. The Atlas Sync routing algorithm, the beating heart of the entire operation, required a synchronization key that connected to the global logistics network. This wasn't just a password. It was a complex authentication protocol that verified the identity of the system making the request. Without it, Atlas Sync could run locally, managing perhaps a few dozen shipments. With it, the system could coordinate thousands of containers across continents. The key generation process was my intellectual property, protected under Clause 7.4c of my original employment contract, the clause that Veronica never read, the clause that stated any implementation of my proprietary algorithms required my explicit written authorization. I documented everything else, every peripheral system, every backup protocol, every disaster recovery procedure, but the key generation protocol that lived only in my head and in my personal GitHub repository, registered under my LLC 2 years before I'd even joined Halberd. By 10 a.m., the office was bustling. I watched Trevor move into the empty office next to mine, the one reserved for the Director of Strategic Infrastructure, a title that didn't exist until yesterday. He was already redecorating, replacing the standard issue furniture with a standing desk and ergonomic chair that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Maya," he called out, waving me over with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "Quick question about the server architecture." I spent an hour explaining basic concepts while he pretended to understand, nodding and saying things like synergy and scalable solutions. When I mentioned the authentication protocols, his eyes glazed over. "That's pretty technical stuff," he said, laughing. "Good thing Skyvera's handling all that complexity, right?" "Right," I agreed. At noon, I submitted my final system report through the proper channels. Every ticket closed, every issue resolved, every warning flag addressed except for those requiring Clause 7.4c authorization. Those I marked as pending legal review, with a note referencing the specific contract section. The beauty was in its transparency. I wasn't hiding anything. Every potential problem was documented, filed, and flagged in the system. If anyone had bothered to read the automated compliance emails, they would have seen dozens of warnings: authorization required, certification pending, legal review needed. But I knew they wouldn't. Veronica had trained the leadership team to ignore technical details. Damien treated email like white noise. Trevor couldn't even find the ticketing system without help. At 3 p.m., I attended my last team meeting. My developers people I'd mentored, trained, and protected from corporate politics sat around the table looking uncomfortable. They knew what was happening wasn't right, but they also had mortgages, families, visa restrictions that tied them to Halberd. "I want you all to know," I said, looking each of them in the eye, "that you're exceptional engineers. Whatever happens in the coming weeks, remember that you're not responsible for architectural decisions made above your pay grade." Sarah, my lead developer, caught the implication. "Maya, is there something we should—" "Follow the documentation," I interrupted gently. "Everything you need is in the documentation, and always check the compliance dashboard." At 4:45 p.m., I walked into Veronica's office. She was on a call, gesturing for me to wait while she finished discussing catering options for the Skyvera launch party. 5 minutes passed before she finally acknowledged me. "What is it?" "Maya, I have a board presentation in 15 minutes. I placed the manila envelope on her desk. "My resignation, effective 2 weeks from today." Her smile was triumphant. "How professional of you, though honestly, we could transition faster if you'd prefer to leave immediately." "I'll finish my obligations," I said calmly. "The documentation binder will be on your desk Monday morning." "Documentation?" she scoffed. "Marcus says your code is so convoluted it'll be easier to rebuild from scratch anyway." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "That's certainly one approach." As I turned to leave, she called out, "Maya, no hard feelings, right? This is just business." "Just business," I repeated. "Oh, and Veronica, you might want to have legal review Clause 7.4c before the Skyvera launch, just to be thorough." She was already looking at her phone. My words dismissed as the desperate rambling of a defeated employee. I packed my personal items slowly, deliberately: a coffee mug, a photo from the team Christmas party, 3 years of handwritten notebooks containing ideas that would never be implemented. Security watched me from the doorway, probably instructed by Veronica to ensure I didn't steal any company property. If only they knew that the most valuable thing in the building was leaving with me anyway, not in a box or on a thumb drive, but in the space between what I'd documented and what I'd withheld. The binder I left on Veronica's desk the following Monday was perfect, comprehensive, complete, and absolutely useless without the one thing I'd never given them permission. 2 weeks after my last day at Halberd, I was sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Chicago when my phone started buzzing. Not calls I'd blocked most Halberd numbers, but news alerts, tech blogs, logistics forums, industry newsletters, all lighting up with the same story: major supply chain disruption hits Fortune 500 companies. I opened my laptop and pulled up the real-time shipping tracker I'd built years ago, a little side project that monitored global logistics flows. The map that usually showed smooth green lines connecting ports was now a massacre of red. The Port of Rotterdam. 6,300 containers frozen. Port of Long Beach systems offline. Singapore complete gridlock. Every single connection point was displaying the same error. Authorization key missing. Atlas Sync API rejected. The first frantic email came from Sarah at 2:17 p.m. She'd sent it to my personal account, technically violating her NDA, but desperation makes people brave. Maya, the entire system is down. Skyvera deployed their integration this morning and everything crashed. Trevor's saying it's a minor glitch, but I can see the logs. This is catastrophic. What did you do? What did I do? Nothing. That was the beautiful truth of it. I'd done absolutely nothing except follow the letter of my contract. The system was failing because Veronica had done everything, ignored warnings, dismissed protocols, and pushed ahead with an integration that was never legally authorized. By 3 p.m., the shipping blogs had names: Hartman Industries, 12 million in electronics stuck in Rotterdam, Pinnacle Retail Group, Black Friday inventory, paralyzed in Long Beach, Velocity Automotive, just-in-time manufacturing chain severed, production lines stopping across 3 states. These weren't just Halbert's clients. These were Fortune 500 companies with shareholders, board members, and very expensive lawyers who didn't care about Veronica's brand initiatives or Trevor's innovative vision. They cared about their cargo. And right now, $42 million worth of it was frozen in digital purgatory. I pulled up Skyvera's status page, a hastily thrown together WordPress site that Marcus had probably paid someone on Fiverr to create. The latest update, posted at 3:45 p.m., was a masterpiece of corporate denial. We are experiencing minor synchronization delays as part of our planned optimization process. All systems will be fully operational within 2 to 4 hours. 4 hours. In logistics, 4 hours was the difference between profit and bankruptcy. 4 hours meant missed delivery windows, contract penalties, cascading delays that would ripple through supply chains for weeks. Marcus had no idea what he'd promised. My phone rang, unknown number, but I recognized the area code Halbert's legal department. Miss Caldwell, this is Diana Lopez from Halbert Legal. We need to discuss the current situation. Diana. I remembered her sharp, professional, and one of the few people at Halbert who actually read contracts, if she was calling. It meant someone had finally looked at Clause 7.4c. I'm not sure what situation you're referring to, I said carefully. I no longer work for Halbert. The Atlas Sync system is experiencing critical failures. Our investigation shows authorization warnings dating back 2 weeks that reference your intellectual property clause. I said, stirring my coffee. Yes, I flagged those issues before my departure. I believe I also recommended legal review. There was a pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, probably Veronica screaming at someone. Miss Caldwell, we need your authorization to proceed with the Skyvera integration. I understand. My consulting rate is $15,000 per day, with a minimum 7-day engagement. That's extortion. No, I corrected. That's market rate for emergency infrastructure consulting. I'm sure Skyvera can resolve the issues independently if you prefer. More muffled voices. Then Diana came back, her professional composure cracking slightly. Are you aware that 6,300 containers are currently stranded? I'm aware that Halbert chose to proceed with an integration despite numerous warnings about authorization requirements. Every one of those warnings is documented in your ticketing system. Miss Caldwell, Maya people's livelihoods are at stake here. She was right. The dock workers, the drivers, the warehouse staff, none of them had cut my bonus or tried to replace me with nepotism hires. But they also hadn't stood up when Veronica gutted my department or when Trevor took credit for 3 years of my work. My authorization requirements were clearly stated in my contract, I said. A contract that Veronica chose to ignore. If people's livelihoods are at stake, perhaps she should have considered that before prioritizing her cousin's company over functional infrastructure. At 4:20 p.m., the first major client pulled out. Hartman Industries announced they were terminating their contract with Halberd effective immediately, citing catastrophic failure to maintain basic logistics capabilities. The announcement hit the business wires like a bomb. Halberd's stock price, which had been sliding all day, went into freefall. By 5 p.m., my phone had 37 missed calls. Damien, Veronica, Trevor, Marcus, even members of the board, every single one of them had ignored me for 3 years, had dismissed my expertise, had treated me like an interchangeable component in their machine. Now they were learning what happened when you removed a component that was never interchangeable to begin with. Sarah texted me at 6:12 p.m. Veronica just threw a laptop through the conference room window. Security is here. This is insane. I closed my laptop and paid for my coffee, leaving a generous tip for the barista who'd politely ignored my occasional laughter throughout the afternoon. Outside, the Chicago evening was crisp and clear. Somewhere across the city, in a glass tower overlooking the lake, an empire was burning. And all because they'd thought they could cut my bonus without consequences. The beautiful part, I hadn't sabotaged anything. I hadn't planted malicious code or stolen data. I'd simply exercised my legal rights over my own intellectual property. Every warning had been documented. Every flag had been raised. Every I dotted and T crossed. They'd had 2 weeks to read a simple clause in a contract. 2 weeks to understand what they actually owned versus what they'd only licensed. 2 weeks to realize that Maya Caldwell wasn't just code that could be rewritten. But they'd been too arrogant to look. Carl O'Reilly had been at Halberd for 22 years. He'd survived 5 CEOs, 3 mergers, and countless corporate restructurings. As Senior Director of Technical Operations, he was one of the few people who understood how the company actually functioned beneath the PowerPoints and press releases, which is why, at 7:30 p.m., while Veronica and Damien were screaming at lawyers, Carl was doing what he did best, investigating. He sat in his office, methodically reviewing every piece of documentation I'd left behind: the binder, the system reports, the compliance warnings, unlike Trevor, who'd skimmed the executive summary, or Marcus, who declared it unnecessarily complex. Carl read every single page. At 8:45 p.m., he found it, a single line in the authorization matrix, referencing Clause 7.4c of my original employment contract. He pulled up the contract from HR's database, something Veronica had never bothered to do. Implementation of the Atlas Sync routing algorithm, including any derivatives or modifications thereof, requires explicit written authorization from Maya Caldwell, recognized as the sole intellectual property owner of said algorithm. Carl leaned back in his chair. In 22 years, he'd seen a lot of corporate stupidity, but this was spectacular. They'd built a $42 million partnership on a foundation they didn't own. He called Diana Lopez immediately. Diana was in the executive conference room when her phone rang. Around her, the scene was chaos. Veronica had charts showing projected losses: $18 million in immediate penalties, another $24 million in lost contracts. Damien was on a conference call with Singapore, trying to explain why 10,000 containers of electronics were sitting idle. Trevor had disappeared entirely, probably hiding in his Tesla in the parking garage. "Diana, it's Carl. I need you to look at something." She stepped into the hallway, grateful for any excuse to leave that room. "Carl, if this is about the authorization..." "It's about intellectual property law," Carl interrupted. "Maya owns the algorithm, not licenses it to us. Owns it. The contract is ironclad." Diana pulled up the contract on her tablet, reading the clause Carl highlighted. Her stomach dropped. This means... It means every implementation of Atlas Sync without Maya's written permission is a violation of IP law. Skyvera's integration isn't just unauthorized, it's theft. Diana walked back into the conference room and placed her tablet on the table, the contract displayed for everyone to see. The room went silent. Veronica was the first to speak. "That's impossible. She was our employee. Everything she created belongs to Halberd." "No," Diana said quietly. "According to this, She developed the algorithm independently and licensed it to us. We've been operating under her permission for 3 years. When she left and we ignored the authorization warnings. "Get her back," Damien said, his voice barely controlled. "Whatever it takes." "I already tried," Diana admitted. She quoted a consulting rate of $15,000 per day. "Pay it." "There's more," Diana continued. "If this goes to court and with our clients' losses, we're not just liable for the shipping delays, we're liable for IP theft. Maya could sue us for implementing her algorithm without permission. Skyvera could sue us for misrepresenting our ownership. Our clients could sue us for everything." Veronica's face had gone pale. "This is sabotage. She set us up." Carl, who'd been listening from the doorway, finally spoke up. "No, she didn't. I've been reviewing the logs for the past 3 hours. Every warning is there. Every flag was raised. She told you to review Clause 7.4c before the launch. It's documented in an email sent to you directly. Veronica, you marked it as read, but never responded." The implications hung in the air like a guillotine. This wasn't a technical failure that could be blamed on infrastructure or a vendor mistake that could be deflected. This was executive negligence, documented and time-stamped. Marcus Rothwell chose that moment to call, his panic evident even through the speakerphone. "My entire system is locked out. The API keeps rejecting our credentials. My developers say there's some kind of intellectual property block." "Marcus," Veronica started. 18 million. Veronica. Your clients are demanding 18 million in compensation. You said this was your system. You said you had full control. Damien ended the call without a word. At 9:15 p.m., Diana made a discovery that changed everything. Buried in the compliance system was a single ticket, created by me 2 weeks before my resignation. It contained a proposed solution, a formal IP transfer agreement that would have given Halberd full ownership of the Atlas Sync algorithm for a one-time payment of $200,000 less than what they were now losing every hour. The ticket had been auto-assigned to Veronica. She'd closed it without reading it, marking the reason as not aligned with current budget priorities. Carl pulled up the metadata. She closed this ticket the same day she cut Maya's bonus, the same day she signed the Skyvera contract. Diana did the math aloud. She rejected a $200,000 IP purchase to fund a $2 million marketing campaign, and now it's costing us $42 million. The boardroom door opened. 3 board members entered, their faces grim. They'd been monitoring the situation from New York, watching their investment evaporate in real time. "We need solutions, not explanations," the lead director said. "Where is Maya Caldwell?" "She's considering our offer," Diana said carefully. "What offer?" $15,000 per day consulting. The director laughed, but there was no humor in it. Pay her double if necessary, triple, just fix this." Veronica stood up, trying to salvage some authority. "This is extortion. We should take legal action." "Sit down, Veronica." The director's voice was ice. "Legal has reviewed the contracts. Maya Caldwell has done nothing wrong. You, on the other hand, have exposed this company to catastrophic liability through gross negligence." At 10:27 p.m., Carl sent me a text. We'd never been close, but we'd shared a mutual respect for competence in a company that often lacked it. "They finally read the binder. Diana found your IP transfer proposal. The board is here. Veronica's finished." I read the message from my apartment, where I'd been watching the chaos unfold through industry forums and shipping trackers. The Port of Rotterdam had announced they were considering permanent termination of Halberd's access. Singapore was implementing emergency protocols. The dominoes weren't just falling, they were exploding. I typed back a simple response. They should have read it 2 weeks ago. Carl's reply came immediately. "Yes, they should have." The emergency board meeting convened at 11 p.m. in the executive conference room. I wasn't there, but Sarah, who'd been called in to provide technical testimony, recorded the whole thing on her phone and sent me updates in real time. The board had flown in from New York, San Francisco, and London. When board members abandoned their Christmas preparations to converge on Chicago, Heads are about to roll. The lead director, Harrison Blackstone, didn't bother with pleasantries. Current losses. Diana pulled up the live dashboard. 23.7 million in direct penalties. Another 18 million in anticipated contract cancellations. Skyvera is demanding immediate compensation for fraud they claim we misrepresented ownership of the technology. 42 million, Blackstone said slowly. In less than 12 hours. Damien tried to speak, but Blackstone raised his hand. I'm not interested in your explanations. Damien, I'm interested in why a $2,500 bonus dispute has cost us $42 million. The room went silent. Veronica, who'd been typing furiously on her laptop, looked up. This isn't about the bonus. This is about Maya Caldwell sabotaging. Stop! Blackstone's voice could have frozen helium. Legal has reviewed every document, every email, every ticket in your system. Caldwell did nothing wrong. She documented everything. She warned you explicitly. She even offered to sell us the IP for $200,000, an offer you personally rejected. He pulled up the email on the main screen. Veronica's response to my IP transfer proposal, sent at 4:12 p.m. on the day she cut my bonus. This request is ridiculous. Deny and close. You called $200,000 ridiculous, Blackstone continued. Would you like to know what's ridiculous? Losing $42 million because you wanted to punish an engineer who made you look bad. Trevor chose that moment to slink into the room, probably hoping his absence had gone unnoticed. It hadn't. Mr. Slate, Blackstone addressed him. You've been Director of Strategic Infrastructure for exactly 16 days. In that time, you've managed to oversee the complete collapse of our logistics network. Congratulations. That might be a company record. I was just following Veronica's strategic vision. The strategic vision to replace a functioning system with your wife's cousin's startup. Blackstone pulled up Skyvera's incorporation documents. A company registered 18 months ago, with no significant logistics experience, whose CEO happens to share Veronica's maiden name. The nepotism, laid out so plainly, hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah later told me that at this point, several board members were openly discussing criminal liability. The word fraud was being thrown around with increasing frequency. At 11:45 p.m., they called me. It was Blackstone himself, which told me how desperate they were. Board chairs don't make phone calls unless the company is bleeding out. Miss Caldwell, he began, his voice carefully modulated. I'm Harrison Blackstone, chairman of Halberd's board. Mr. Blackstone, I acknowledged. I'll be direct. We need your authorization to restore the Atlas sync system. Name your price. I let the silence stretch. In negotiations, the first person to speak after the ask usually loses. Miss Caldwell. I heard you, I said. I'm considering whether I want to be involved with Halberd again in any capacity. We're prepared to offer significant compensation. It's not about money. Mr. Blackstone, your CFO made it clear that I wasn't valued at Halberd. Your CEO supported her. Your Director of Strategic Infrastructure called my work unnecessarily complex. Why would I help a company that has such a low opinion of my contributions? There was muffled conversation in the background. Then Blackstone returned. What if I told you that the positions of CFO, CEO, and Director of Strategic Infrastructure are all under review? I'd say that's a good start. Miss Caldwell, I need to be very clear about something. If we can't restore service by market open, Halberd faces potential bankruptcy. Our clients are already drafting lawsuits. The port authorities are considering permanent bans. This isn't just about $42 million anymore. It's about the company's survival. I thought about Sarah and my team, about the good engineers who'd been caught in Veronica's power games, about the dock workers and drivers who needed their jobs. About 3 years of my life poured into building something remarkable, only to watch it handed over to incompetence. I'll provide emergency authorization to restore basic functionality, I said finally. This will stop the immediate bleeding and get containers moving, but it's a 24-hour patch, not a solution. Thank you. And for a permanent resolution. 3 conditions. First, immediate payment of my original bonus, the full $45,000 that was promised. Second, a formal acknowledgement that I own the Atlas Sync algorithm, with a proper licensing agreement going forward. Third, a written apology from Veronica Slate, acknowledged in front of the entire company. There was a long pause. The first two are acceptable. The third is non-negotiable. Veronica humiliated me in front of the entire leadership team. She made it clear that I was disposable, that my work was replaceable. She needs to acknowledge, publicly, that she was wrong. I'll see what I can do. At 12:15 a.m., I sent the emergency authorization code to Diana Lopez, with instructions on how to implement it. Within minutes, containers started moving again. The red alerts on shipping trackers turned yellow, then slowly green. The ports of Rotterdam, Long Beach, and Singapore came back online. But everyone knew it was just a bandage on a severed artery. 24 hours to find a permanent solution, or everything would crash again. At 12:30 a.m., the board voted. It was unanimous. Sarah's text came through at 12:41 a.m. Veronica just got fired. Security is escorting her out right now. She threw her laptop at Blackstone. Missed. Damien is trying to negotiate a resignation package. Trevor already ran. The empire that Veronica had built on my work, funded by my expertise, elevated by my innovations, had collapsed in less than a day, all because she'd tried to save $42,500. The irony was beautiful in its simplicity. She'd wanted to break me, to show me I was nothing without Halberd. Instead, she'd proven that Halberd was nothing without me. The email came at 9 a.m. sharp the next morning. Diana Lopez, now acting as emergency liaison between Halberd and reality, had crafted it carefully. The subject line was simple: urgent response required. Miss Caldwell, the board has accepted your terms. Full bonus payment has been wire transferred to your account. The licensing agreement is attached for your review. Regarding the third condition, there was an attachment, a video file. I clicked play. Veronica Slate stood in the main lobby of Halberd Dynamics, the same lobby where her portrait hung next to her husband's, proclaiming them visionary leaders in global logistics. Security guards flanked her. The entire company had been assembled, over 300 employees packed into the space, with others watching via video link from remote offices. Her voice was hollow, reading from a prepared statement. I, Veronica Slate, formally apologize to Maya Caldwell for my failure to recognize the critical value of her contributions to Halberd Dynamics. My decision to reduce her compensation while simultaneously ignoring her intellectual property rights was not only unprofessional but catastrophically negligent. Maya Caldwell's expertise was irreplaceable, and my inability to recognize this has cost this company immeasurably. She looked up from the paper, and for a moment, our eyes met through the camera. The woman who'd told me I was just code was now admitting, in front of everyone who'd watched her humiliate me, that she'd been completely, devastatingly wrong. The video ended with security escorting her out through the same doors she'd walked through so confidently just 24 hours earlier. Diana's email continued. The board requests a meeting at your earliest convenience to discuss a permanent solution. They're prepared to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer, reporting directly to the board, with full autonomy over infrastructure decisions. CTO, the position Veronica had blocked me from even being considered for, claiming I lacked executive presence. I closed the laptop and walked to my window, looking out over Lake Michigan. Somewhere out there, $42 million worth of cargo was moving smoothly through international waters, guided by algorithms I'd written in this very apartment during countless sleepless nights. My phone buzzed. Sarah. The board just announced Damien's resignation, effective immediately. Trevor's LinkedIn already says seeking new opportunities. Did you see Veronica's apology? I saw it. Are you coming back? I thought about it. The power to return triumphant, to take the position I deserved all along, to rebuild what Veronica had tried to destroy. It was tempting. No, I typed, but I'll consult, on my terms. Because that was the real lesson here. They'd thought I needed them more than they needed me. They'd thought cutting my bonus would make me desperate, compliant, grateful for whatever scraps they offered. Instead, I'd shown them the truth. Competence is leverage, expertise is power, and knowing your worth is the ultimate weapon. The final email I sent was to Harrison Blackstone directly. Mr. Blackstone, I appreciate the board's offer, but I'll be declining the CTO position. Instead, I'm establishing Caldwell Systems, Inc., a specialized logistics consulting firm. Halbert is welcome to become a client. My rate is $20,000 per day, with a minimum 30-day engagement for initial implementation. The Atlas Sync algorithm will remain my intellectual property, licensed to clients who demonstrate proper respect for both the technology and its creator. Veronica was wrong about one thing in particular. I'm not just code. Code can be rewritten. What I am is the person who understands how to build systems that $42 million companies depend on, and more importantly, I understand my value. Best regards, Maya Caldwell, CEO, Caldwell Systems, Inc. Blackstone's response came within an hour. Terms accepted. When can you start? I smiled, typing my reply. Monday, 9 a.m. sharp. I'll need a corner office. The one that used to belong to your former CFO will do nicely. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Veronica had cut my $45,000 bonus to save money. That decision had cost Halbert $42 million in immediate losses, their CEO, their CFO, and now would cost them $20,000 per day for my consulting services, more than my entire annual bonus every 2.25 days. She'd wanted to teach me a lesson about power and hierarchy. Instead, she'd taught me the most valuable lesson of my career: never let anyone else define your worth. And when someone tries to cut you down to size, make sure you own the very ground they're standing on. I raised my coffee cup to the Chicago skyline, to the portrait being removed from Halbert's lobby, to the empire that had crumbled with a single missing signature. They'd thought I would stay silent. They'd thought I would endure. They thought wrong. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate revenge and justice served cold. Where are you listening from today? Drop a comment below and let's connect with fellow listeners around the world. If this story of standing up for your worth resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about workplace justice. Have you ever faced a similar situation? How did you handle it? Your stories and perspectives make this community amazing. Hit that subscribe button and let's keep sharing these powerful tales of triumph against corporate tyranny.